Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry of the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication. And what I'm doing in this particular episode, it's a preview episode, it's a sneak peek sample episode to celebrate the return of AMC's adaptation of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. Season 3 is being rebranded appropriately as the Vampire Lestat. So let me just take a moment to talk a little bit about this. For a lot of us growing up in the 80s and 90s, once we kind of came of age, of that reading age of indulging and ingesting horror stories, horror novels, spending our times in the bookstores, the shelves were lined with the authors Stephen King, Dean Koontz, John Saul, Robert McCammon, and Anne Rice. And she was a massive part of the 90s. She first launched the first novel of the Vampire Chronicles, Interview with a Vampire, in 1976. We are now at our 50th anniversary of that, if you can believe it. It just happened in April, I believe. So happy 50th anniversary to this novel that kicked it all off. As I will get to in the episode for Interview with a Vampire, I explore the real life tragedy that helped inspire the heartbeat of that novel, which was the death of her daughter, a true tragedy. And you can find that melancholic thread woven all throughout the novel and the Vampire Chronicles at large. So for those of you who might have forgotten or you weren't there at the time, when she released The Vampire Lestat and then Queen of the Damned and Tale of the Body Thief, and then she was also writing The Mayfair Witches, she hit this boom in the 90s that is really hard to discuss if you weren't there. But one thing is for sure, Anne Rice rebranded and revolutionized the concept of the vampire. You will have seen her fingerprints all over vampire stories, because every vampire story that is told in the modern day has something to do with the legacy left behind by Anne Rice and her depictions of vampires. Vampire Diaries, True Blood. You don't get that without Anne Rice. Twilight, for what it's worth, you don't get that without Anne Rice and the Vampire Chronicles. This idea of a lovelorn, lonely vampire who loves and wants to be with others, that sense of melancholy and lust and romanticism and existentialism. These are deep novels. And of course, at the heart as well is the queer experience, which was revolutionary in 1976, revolutionary in the 1990s. And what has been so refreshing is to see that subtext made text in the AMC show. So if you haven't watched the AMC show, Interview with a Vampire, the first 2 seasons are available. Last I checked, I think that they were on Netflix. Please do yourselves a favor. Even if you are not a fan of the Vampire Chronicles, even if you've never experienced the pleasure of reading those novels, if maybe you have only seen the Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise adaptation from the 90s, which was what a roller coaster ride that was. If you've only experienced, maybe only heard about it, aren't sure, please do yourself a favor, because this is incredible television. This is some of the best television that you are going to see, bar none, hands down. It's incredible what they have been able to do. And I will go so far as to say, and this is not a knock on Anne Rice at all or her writing, but I feel as though they've actually, with some decisions that they have made in how they're telling the story, updating the story, making changes to characters and relationships, they're actually improving upon what Anne Rice provided to us with the texts. And again, this is not an insult to Anne Rice, which is why this show is so astounding, because what she did was so high level for them to be able to not only bring it to life, but actually improve it, is a testament to the work being done over on AMC. And at the center of this is a performance by Sam Reed that is an example of someone who matches the depiction of the character with such perfection. It's a rarity. And the only few people that I can think of as actors who have been able to match a character and embody that character so seamlessly as if they were literally born to play that character. It's what you think of when you think of Christopher Reeve as Superman, Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier. Those are two that come to mind. And along that same level of thinking, you have Sam Reed as the Vampire Lestat. He gets every bit of nuance of this character who is romantic and bratty and arrogant, but has low confidence in himself, needs to be around other people, is looked up to, is looked down upon, likes to be the center of attention. There are so many little things that you need to do to be able to hit this character, and it's been an absolute pleasure watching Sam Reed take this literary icon and bring him to life in a way that I didn't think was possible. It's incredible with little flourishes that he does, little tones that he has in his voice. He truly embodies this idea of Lestat as the vampire brat prince. So what I am doing to celebrate the third season, apologize for my dog, to celebrate the third season of the Interview with the Vampire, which this season is rightfully so called The Vampire Lestat, I am releasing this sample episode that I have the full episode over on Patreon for Interview with a Vampire. So all you have to do, listen to this. If you like it, then go on over to the Patreon page. There is a thoughtful, deep dive, analytical breakdown of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, and there is a follow-up review for The Vampire Lestat. I, over on Patreon, will be providing regular reviews of the AMC show. So if you have been enjoying it, then please join me on my journey at over at Patreon. I would love to have you join along. All right, so let's go back in time. So when I got really into horror, capital H literature with Stephen King. As I've said in other podcast episodes, it wasn't just shackled to Stephen King. I would, once I caught up on all of the Stephen King books, I started to peruse to see what else was available. So that's how I got into Dan Simmons. That's how I got into Robert McCammon. That's how I got into John Saul and Dean Koontz. And yeah, this is how I got into Anne Rice. So in those days, that's how I got into Brian Lumley. But in those days, and I could be wrong. I could be just looking at things through a very simple lens, but there did not seem to be as many options as there are now. There seemed to be a lot of quantity of a fewer selections, so there were large swaths of Dean Koontz. There were large swaths of Stephen King selections, if that makes sense. And like I said, I could be wrong, but also, that was 30 years ago. And, in those 30 years, there's been a new generations of horror writers to help fill out the spaces on the shelves, which is a great thing. But back then it seemed that there was less or fewer. I'm never quite sure which one to use there, but fewer choices to choose from with your horror options. But of those choices that you had, they were all big names, and Anne Rice was a big name. So I remember falling in love with this series before the movie came out, which allowed me to get vested in all of the buzz surrounding the movie. And I just remember sinking my fangs into this world that she built, and absolutely, falling in love with the deep mythology of it, which I will talk about at much greater length in the Vampire Lestat, because I have a little more qualms now as an adult reader, but back then, to see this world and its history so fully realized, it really was captivating for a younger reader. It was just really really cool, and seductive and alluring, and it's a great journey through history with these vampires as its main characters. And I had fallen in love with it. I enjoyed the movie when it came out, though my wife and I just watched it a couple years ago after finishing the AMC show, and I liked it a lot less, especially in comparison to what the great work that was done with AMC. But I eventually I had fallen out of touch with the expanded mythos. I think that the Vampire Armand was the last one that I had read. I know that they had done Pandora, and then there was a whole Atlantis series. I had also loved the Mayfair Witches. That first novel I thought was absolutely incredible, par for par as captivating as anything that she had done with the vampires. I loved that. So I was in it for a while, and then as much as I was in it, I was out. I fell out. Yeah, and then the show came along, and I fell in love all over again. And I will talk about the show later, but if you have not seen this, you don't need to have read the novels to enjoy it, because the bones are there. The large swaths of story are there, but there are tweaks and there are updates and there are some turns that you wouldn't expect, but all still um, keeping with what Anne Rice had delivered back in the day. It has been a real revelation of an adaptation. It's been great. It's been great to watch, and I'm excited that we get to share it together. All right, so let's start right at the beginning. I mean, to talk about beginnings, it is an incredible beginning. So this is how Anne Rice starts. "I see," said the vampire thoughtfully, and slowly he walked across the room towards the window. For a long time he stood there against the dim light from the Disavario street and the passing beams of traffic. The boy could see the furnishings of the room more clearly now: the round oak table, the chairs, a wash bin hung on one wall with a mirror. He set his briefcase on the table and waited. "But how much tape do you have with you?" asked the vampire, turning so the boy could see his profile. "Enough for the story of a life?" "Sure, if it's a good life. Sometimes I interview as many as 3 or 4 people a night if I'm lucky, but it has to be a good story. That's only fair, isn't it?" "Admirably fair," the vampire answered. "I would like to tell you the story of my life, then. I would like to do that very much." So already, right away, Anne Rice is just putting it all out there. The very first sentence, "I see," said the vampire thoughtfully, and slowly he walked across the room towards the window. Already, who is the vampire? Who is this boy? Why are they in a room together? At the time of this writing, vampires were deadly and dangerous. For viewers, for readers, there should be a sense of immediate danger. Anne Rice plays with the preconceptions of a vampire here, with the interviewer, who we will eventually know as Daniel. And he inquires about the superstition that vampires don't like light. And we get the first description of what a vampire in this world looks like. At once the room was flooded with a harsh yellow light, and the boy, staring up at the vampire, could not repress a gasp. His fingers danced backwards on the table to grasp the edge. "Dear God," he whispered, and then he gazed speechless at the vampire. The vampire was utterly white and smooth, as if he were sculpted from bleached bone, and his face was as seemingly inanimate as a statue, except for two brilliant green eyes that looked down at the boy intently like flames in a skull. But then the vampire smiled almost wistfully, and the smooth white substance of his face moved with the inevitably flexible but minimal lines of a cartoon. "Do you see?" he asked softly. The boy shuddered, lifting his hand as if to shield himself from a powerful light. His eyes moved slowly over the finely tailored black coat he'd only glimpsed in the bar, the long folds of the cape, the black silk tie knotted at the throat, and the gleam of the white collar that was as white as the vampire's flesh. He stared at the vampire's full black hair, the waves that were combed back over the tips of the ears, the curves that barely touched the edge of the white collar. Just a few pages in, she creates a vampire that is both otherworldly but utterly human. He reassures the interviewer, demonstrates vulnerability when talking about the death of his brother, and is surprised to hear that he has a New Orleans accent. Again, keep in mind that up until this point, the most famous depiction of a vampire was the alien and distant Count Dracula, and the even more alien and inhuman Count Orlok of Nosferatu. This image that we have here will be appropriated by the end of this decade with the television adaptation of Salem's Lot, a novel which comes only a year before the publication of this particular novel. This is long before the humanization of the vampire, and it's with this novel that we see the origins of that interpretation of the monster. From this novel, we see the origins of Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, that romanticization of the vampire as a lover. And of course, without Interview with a Vampire, we don't get True Blood, we don't get Twilight, and we don't get all of the modern incarnations of the vampire as a monster. Here is the interpretation of the monster as a lover, a creature deeply human and fueled by passion. And then less than 5 pages in, Anne Rice gives us an incredible description of the childhood of our vampire. "You see, we lived far better there than we could have ever lived in France. Perhaps the sheer wilderness of Louisiana only made it seem so, but seeming so it was. I remember the imported furniture that cluttered the house." The vampire smiled. "And the harpsichord. That was lovely. My sister used to play it. On summer evenings, she would sit at the keys with her back to the open French windows, and I can still remember that thin, rapid music and the vision of the swamp rising beyond her, the moss-hung cypresses floating against the sky. And there were the sounds of the swamp, a chorus of creatures, the cry of the birds. I think we loved it. It made the rosewood furniture all the more precious, the music more delicate and desirable. Even when the wisteria tore the shutters off the attic windows and worked its tendrils right into the wash-wicked brick in less than a year. Yes, we loved it." Before long, we get our first hint of Lestat, when Louis writes of the death of his brother, whose entire body moved forward as if being swept by a wind and fell, breaking his neck suddenly. So this is the question. With this wind that comes, knowing that, spoiler alert for the Vampire Lestat, we know that prior to him arriving in Louisiana, he has drunk from the blood of Akasha and has abilities. I don't remember him having the ability of telekinesis, so maybe this is a moot question, but it is interesting to wonder. Does the brother here die by accident, or is there a larger game at play for Lestat to take the brother off of the board, to sweep in and prey on a vulnerable Louis? Right away, Rice is weaving in philosophical underpinnings of faith and our relationship with God. Louis believes that he is responsible for his brother's death, the brother who had claimed to see visions sent from God himself. So this also reveals the unreliable narrator component to this story. Because if a character simultaneously believes in God and believes that his brother was sent visions by God, and that the brother was so affected by his own words of disbelief that he would throw himself down the stairs in an active suicide attempt, that speaks to a level of self-importance from our narrator, whose disbelief is as great as the power of God itself, so much so that it would cause someone to murder themselves. So right here, Anne Rice, in other ways, is asking us to make sure that we're always questioning Louis, because this is not an objective story. This is the interview with the vampire. And this interview itself, given to us by the vampire, should be questioned. As we will go on in the later books, we should question what Louis is giving us and the events that he is presenting to us. All right, everyone. So I'm going to put a pin in it there. If you liked the review, I go in pretty deep of Interview with the Vampire. If you liked it, there's still over an hour just about of review left. And then, like I said, there's a subsequent episode in which I get into the Vampire Lestat, and I look forward to continuing my exploration of the Vampire Chronicles this summer. So thank you, everyone, and I hope that you are able to join me on my journey with these characters in live action form as I review the show regularly. And you can find those episodes along with this episode, other book reviews, other show reviews, other movie reviews over on the Patreon page. So patreon.com/stephenkingcast. I hope to see all of you there, and may you have long days and pleasant nights. And I'll see you here next time where MOON spells and Ricecast.